record to the computer. All right.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Tuesday, February 25th Select Board meeting. The meeting's being recorded for our YouTube channel, and we will have our public comments at the beginning and the end of the meeting. Is there any public comment right now? I don't see any, so I will hand it over to you.
All right. And so there were no items to be added to the agenda, though I will know I'll be touching on in my administrator update, the memo Alex sent out about the elections. And we had no scheduled appointments. In terms of the minutes of the January 28th meeting, I had some edits come along today from Aria and Bronwyn. Bronwyn regarding attendance and Aria regarding some tweaks that I think added some substance. I have incorporated those, but I haven't had a chance to send them out to the board, but all of those edits are included. So if we want to table, or we can move to approve, and I'll send in the morning.
I'm happy to move to approve.
Perfect.
And I'll second both sets of minutes. Was that your motion,
Sure.
Bronwyn?
Yes, both
Okay.
sets of minutes.
And
I'd
I
like to-
second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
All right, and it looks like it's 3-0. There were no items for review, and so now we will get into the first of our abatements tonight. And so abatement requests 5 through 13, I've combined for the terms of the memo all of the abatement requests on one, but they were individual requests for completeness. And in summary, in 1975, and just I spoke with the Seidmans before the meeting started, but just for everyone who's listening and in attendance, we will go through my findings, summary of the requests, analysis. The Seidmans will then, or the next abatement owner would be able to offer their thoughts as well before we move into board deliberation, which the board could ask questions or the board could move in a direction that they wanted to. Is that kind of outline the process for everyone? Perfect. And so in summary, in 1975, a parcel in town was subdivided into 9 lots, O1R-6 and O1R-6A through H. All of these parcels owned by the same family. Seidman Ledges LLC is now requesting that the town assess these parcels reductions to get them closer to what it would be as one parcel. And further, relative to O1R-006, the Seidmans requested a $0 reduction, but included to be in the broader assessment of the full 9 parcels at $1,401,300. And so for abatement request number 5, and again, this had no request change in valuation, but was included for completeness. We had a 4-acre home site in the Jewett Road neighborhood, which prior to factoring was at $75,000 an acre. There were 10 acres of rear land at $2,000 an acre, 5 acres of rear land 2, and no site improvement. And again, I'd note for the Jewett Road neighborhood, the factoring that was undertaken by Mr. Van Tynen was at a magnitude of approximately 1.8. When we get to the Nubble Road in a minute, it was slightly different. And on abatement request number 6, we had a breakdown in land on O1R-006A, which is a 0.78 acre home site, again in that Jewett Road neighborhood. It has no site improvement. There is no building valuation because it is only land. The Seidmans had requested a reduction of $22,200 to that land valuation. And in terms of comparison for consistency, with all of these lots, because we're going to be going through 9, I did, for the memo's purposes, only include a handful of comparisons broken out. But at the end of the packet, I did include a multitude of other lots that could have joined in as well. And so in consistency for comparisons, I looked at 35 Jewett Road, O1R-005E. This is a 2.08 acre home site. And again, it's based off of that 75,000 per acre prior to the 1.8 factoring in that Jewett Road neighborhood. This lot also has a site improvement. And we also looked at 3 Martin Road, O1R-005, which is in the Weber Road neighborhood, but right there in that map, on property map O1R, there are actually 3 different neighborhoods, all with different valuations. But I wanted to show for consistency's sake that the Weber Road and Jewett Road neighborhoods had some consistency in valuation and fairness in that neighborhood. And there was a site improvement on that other one. Again, that's something we can ignore. We're really looking in abatement request number 6, 01R-006A, that neighborhood where there was consistency. And it would be my opinion on this one that these lots are consistently assessed. On abatement request number 7, we had a breakdown of the land description for 01R-006B. This is in the Jewett Road neighborhood, a 0.78 acre home site at 75,000 an acre prior to that factoring. For what it's worth, last year, the land valuation was 59,600. It's now 107,300. I'd note that this one was factored a little bit with a 10% reduction because of access issues with that lot. And we compared this lot again because it's that Jewett Road neighborhood for consistency with both the Weber and Jewett Road, 35 Jewett Road, 01R 5E and 01R 5D. And in comparison with these lots, it is again my opinion that these are consistently assessed. When we get into abatement request number 8, we get into a breakdown to the land description for 01R-006C. I'd note that last year, this lot was valued at $56,100. It's now valued at $100,900. That is again at the approximate factoring of 1.8 that Mr. Van Tynen undertook. And it's in that Jewett Road neighborhood. And again, this is another lot that had a 10% reduction because of the access piece. Their requested reduction from the Seidmans on lot 01R-6-C was $3,900. And again, because this was that Jewett Road neighborhood, we looked at 35 Jewett Road and 3 Martin Road to show some consistency in that neighborhood. Though again, at the end of the packet, I do encourage folks to look at those other valuation reports if there is questions. I'm also seeing a member of the audience trying to join in, so bear with me a moment. And so that would get us now onto abatement request number 9, which is 01R-006D. And this is the first one tonight that we're looking at in the Nubble Road neighborhood. This is a 0.73 acre home site, and it was previously valued at $281,200, and it's now valued at $556,800. And I'd note that the Nubble Road neighborhood across the board saw a factoring of approximately 1.98, and that's why this valuation seemed a little bit higher than per se the Jewett Road increases. I would note that this lot does get an 80% factor for topography, which translates to a 20% reduction. And I would note that the Seidmans were requesting a reduction of $459,800 on this lot. For the Nubble Road neighborhoods, the consistent ones that you'll be seeing on the next few, I looked at no street address, 01R-23. It's a 0.41 acre home site in the Nubble Road, in the Nubble neighborhood, and they were valued at that $429,000 per acre, just as the other one was prior to factoring. And this lot of 01R-23 did have a reduction due to restrictions and no site improvement. We also looked at 01R-20A, and I use this one because it actually breaks into home site, rear land 1, and some of the rear land 2 pieces. And I just note for that home site piece of 01R-20A that we're looking at comparison, neighborhood is the same. We get into some rear land, which this lot didn't have, so we're really looking for consistency just on the home site. But for the sake of, getting into what the rear land would look like in this neighborhood, you're looking at rear land 1 being valued at $6,710 per acre prior to the factoring. Rear land 2 at 5 acres was $3,300 an acre, and rear land 3, there were 32 acres of that in this comparison property, which was $660 per acre. And part of the reason I included this comparison is that as we're looking at potentially the request was to get this more assessed as if it was one master lot in evaluation. I wanted to showcase what rear land would be in that Nubble Road neighborhood. But it is my contention that on abatement request number 9, this is a consistently assessed valuation per that neighborhood. And abatement request number 10, I broke down, it is a 0.46 acre home site, again, at that higher Nubble Road neighborhood, 429,000 an acre before factoring. This one received a 20% reduction for topography. It does have a site improvement on it, because this parcel does, it's the only one that has a building on it with a valuation of 212,800. And there was no requested reduction on this lot with the building. In abatement request number 11, there was a breakdown of description in the land for 01R-6F. And I would note that the land was previously valued at 249,800, with that approximate 1.98 factoring that was undertaken by Mr. Van Tynen for the entire Nubble Road neighborhood. We did get that lot up to $494,700. And I'd note that there was a 20% reduction on this one as well for topography. We did compare these to those other Nubble Road neighborhood breakdowns that I gave previously. Does the board want me to repeat all of that again, or are we kind of on the same page of those two lots for Nubble Road? Because I know I'm now just saying lots of numbers, and I want to make sure that I'm not missing the broader point in the details. But it is my opinion, based on these comparisons, and again, there were several valuation reports at the end that showcase that Nubble Road neighborhood is consistently assessed. Did you raise your hand, Bronwyn?
No,
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing a question.
but you asked a question which nobody answered. And I'm happy for you to go on. I would point out to anyone listening to your recital of numbers and lot numbers that the board has seen these documents. We've had quite a bit of time to review them. So this is not our first waltz through all the numbers.
And I would just add, Bronwyn, as well, that now that we're posting the packets on the town website under upcoming select board meeting information, this whole packet's online as well if the public decided they wanted to follow along. But I will get back now into abatement request number 12, which was for 01R lot 006G, which is a half-acre home site in that Nubble Road neighborhood, 429,000 an acre prior to factoring, and it did receive a 20% reduction for topography. This lot actually does have a little bit of rear land 1 designation and 0.18 acres, and there's no site improvement. And there's a requested reduction of $396,600 to that land value. We compared, for the memo's sake, those same two lots. I also thought it was appropriate to really show again that that rear land 1 in this neighborhood is consistent at the rate that it's at, though this is 0.18 acres versus the 1.25. But again, it's my opinion that these are consistently assessed lots. And in abatement request number 13, there was a breakdown in land for 01R-006-H. It's a 1.68 acre home site. We're back in that Jewett Road neighborhood, and there was a requested reduction of 45,200. The land is currently valued at 142,200. We compared to 35 Jewett Road and 3 Martin Road as previously described in this memo. And it is my opinion that these are consistently assessed. And my findings are that the Seidman's request is to assess these lots as if they were a combined lot, which is something in terms of assessing equity that we can't do. But I do believe that this is something that could be achieved by merging lots through deed. And if combined, however, they wouldn't be able to split in the future. Lots of right now, there are several lots of record that are under the 2 acre minimum. If lots in the future were combined, if there was an eventual split again, they wouldn't be able to be less than that 2 acres. Each of these lots of record since the 1970s have had a home site. And I would note, as we've kind of talked in all of our abatements, the home site is the highest level of valuation based on what that neighborhood is before it breaks down. And with all of these parcels, there are over 10 acres of home sites because there were 9 separate lots. And it's been contended that several of these lots are unbuildable, but if setbacks can be met, you could build because it is a lot of record. And so based on my review, it is my recommendation that these 9 requests from the Seidman Ledges be denied, as their assessments are currently consistent with similar like properties, and changing these valuations would in fact create inconsistencies in those several neighborhoods that we touched on. And I would note that I did not compare each of the individual Sideman lots to each other for likeness, though I could have. And if I had, that similarity would be even more apparent, but I wanted to pull in other parcels versus comparing all of the ones that are kind of in contention right now. And there were several valuation reports included in your packet of all of those lots to back up the numbers I had. There was some supplemental information provided by the landowners. And at the very end, there were additional lots behind the map that, again, I felt were consistent and could showcase this a little bit further. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if the board wanted to wait on that front, I'd be happy to give the Sidemen who have driven a considerable amount today an ability to share their thoughts as well. And I hope it was a smooth drive. Though I have heard that we have a lot more snow than they do in Massachusetts.
I'd certainly like to hear from the Sidemans, and hope they'll come up to the table to speak so we can see them as well.
Thanks for having me. Hope you have access to the town map. So I guess what got me concerned, obviously there was a significant increase in assessment this year, but what concerned me is when we take the whole parcel, 25 acres, and add up these numbers that Tyler just went through, and I thought that was very thorough. Those numbers come up to $2.7 million as an assessed value. When you look at any of the other parcels where there's a single house or no house on the same map, the next highest property, there's a lot 025. That's 36 acres. The land value is assessed at $1.44 million, which is where we came up with the number of about 1.4 for this property of 25 acres, considerably less, and less shorefront property as well. So we're hoping, our thought was that if this was assessed as a single unit, that it would be assessed very differently than using the formulas that you use. And part of the issue that for us is a little bit tricky is, so these parcels were divided, as Tyler said, in 1975 and 76. And at that time, it was reasonable or expected that you could build houses 75 feet back from the shore. That's still true, but as you all know, the Maine Shoreline Act was passed earlier this century, and we're now abiding by that. And one of the features of the Maine Shoreline Act is that if property slopes at more than 20%, we're constricted, we can't build there. So all of these lots that we talked about today that are labeled A through G have a significant fraction of space that's on the 20% slope. And so the closest that a house could be built, even if you redivided the properties, would be well back from the shore. So I think, and you said, and I didn't know it till just now, that there's a 20%, that you guys take a 20% reduction. I feel like in some instances, 20% may be a reasonable number, but here where we can't build on the entire lot, so we would be, as you said, and the Shoreline Act requires this, since we now are a family owning neighboring lots, we would have to basically rebuild, redesign the lot structure and go through the whole process of basically coming up with a new plan for this piece of property. But I feel like all of the other lots, these large lots on in the same map, again, 25 is a good example, but 21 is another example. All of those lots would also have, if they wanted to build more houses, would have to go and provide a development plan. So yes, it's true that we have these home sites here, but since we can't build on them, they shouldn't be valued nearly as much as you have, but rather should be valued as almost as the houses that could be built would be basically on the 10-acre piece. And that, as you pointed out, it's a significant difference in cost or value assessment. So that's one item. Another item just to point out, and I think this is, so the shore, and I by the way, I do support the Shoreline Act. I'm sure many people here support the Shoreline Act. I think it's a reasonable thing, but I feel that since this law has come into effect, it does change the value of our property, and our assessment should be taken, should be addressed taking that rule into consideration, so. But anyway, along the shore there, just to point out, this property was divided up in a very funny way. So lot 6, which is the back acre property that belongs to Jewett, and as you said, the Jewett Road neighborhood, that property actually owns the actual shoreline 75 feet back. So it runs it's carved out in a funny way. So it's just another example of where we would have or if we go to the trouble of we're not planning on developing. It's just the opposite. It seems, so we could go through the issue or the approach of putting all these lots into one piece. I don't quite understand what the benefit would be, because if we ever wanted to develop, we would have to go and make a whole new development plan anyway. So we would have to go, and that's actually why I wanted to meet with you. I wanted to know, one, what would happen to the assessment? How would you assess this property if those lines weren't there? Because right now, these are all sort of paper lines. And if it wasn't there, what would be the assessed value of this sort of 25-acre piece?
Did you look that up?
That's not something that we would have looked up at this stage. That's
Okay.
something that if it was combined, the assessor would go into. But when I looked at OR 01R-20A, this is a lot that has a home site in that Nubble Road neighborhood, which many of those are, at 1.25 acres, which is a little bit higher than most of your shoreline lots. It also starts to break out.
I'm sorry, 20A, according to my looking at the plan, is the 39-acre piece.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, they have also a home site on that. I don't quite understand what you're saying.
So,
As I said,
so
it's a one point.
home site is a term that could be a little bit of a misnomer. It's not necessarily that a house is there, that is just the assessing term of, this is the top layer of the land.
But I guess I misunderstood. You said that there was a 1 point something acre.
In their 39 acres,
Okay.
1.25 acres of it's assessed at a home site. And then it breaks into rear land designations.
okay.
And that's where, if you had one master lot combined by deed,
Okay,
you'd then see, for instance, and it's not gonna be mirrored exactly these numbers, the assessor would visit and make determinations. But rear land 2 in the Nubble Road neighborhood, prior to the factoring of 1.98, was 6,710 or 6,710 an acre. So right now you have 10 acres of home site, 6 of them in that Nubble Road neighborhood. The highest level a home site could ever be would be 4 acres. So I would see a deduction there on the classification. But when you get into rear land 1, you're at, which they have 1.25 of that 39 acres is considered rear land 2. Then 5 acres is at rear land 3, which in that Nubble Road neighborhood was 3,300 an acre. And then they have 32 acres in rear land 3, which is actually assessed prior to that factoring of 1.98, 660 an acre. So you're looking closer to $1,300 an acre on that 32 of the acres. So assessing is almost kind of like you're baking a cake, and the top layer is going to be the highest. And as you slowly work your way back based on the size of lots, you start to go down in value on some of what's considered backland, though really that's just in terms of the assessing, not on paper that these 4 acres, we consider the backland, so they're there. So if you had a master lot of all of your land, you'd still have probably 2 to 4 acres of a home site. The assessor would make that determination. You then have a designation going into rear land 1, which goes from 429,000 an acre to 6,700 an acre. And then at 5 acres of rear land 2, it drops down. So by having all of these lots of record, you're paying, I don't want to say a premium, because that is a lot, it has to be assessed, but it's at that higher rate. But to your point as well, in the event that you combined everything and later on wanted to split off land, you wouldn't be able to have a lot that was 0.73 acres ever again. It would have to be 2.
but in fairness, the 0.73 acres is of no use to us right now, because I can't put a house on it because it's more than 20%. So I would have to combine it with something else, which we could do, but it would require basically the same issue of creating new lot lines and then having approval of the town and so on, and going through the development process. It seems like it's creating paperwork. I'm not sure that it's creating value. So I'm just very surprised, I guess, that these lines can increase the value of the property.
Because they're
1.4 million.
individual lots.
No, I understand, I get it, I totally get it, that they're individual lots, but I don't, since I can't build on them, it doesn't make sense to me. I feel like it comes back, I think, to this factoring of 20% for saying, you're saying, or the town assesses the lot at 20% less because it's in restricted area. But that makes little sense to me when 100% of the lot is restricted. I just don't, I mean, so in other words, the valuation for having property that's 75 feet back from the water should be quite different from the value, and you said it, as you move back away from the water, the value of the property goes down. But it seems here we're forced to go back further, but we don't get any benefit from the, not benefit, but we're charged as if we could build at 75 feet from the water, which we can't.
The house site is still, it's still the house site within that. And nothing's gonna be within 75 feet. So your house lot is 75 feet back to whatever. So that's the,
No, but
the
right,
setback, the setback is 75 feet anyway,
No,
regardless.
but I'm
So-
saying, no, sorry, and normally we thought that we would be able to build within 70, at that
Mhm.
position. But now, because of the Shoreline Act, as I understand it, and the 20% slope, we can't build to 250 feet back till we're out of shoreline. So we can't build within the shoreline.
No, no, within 250 feet, you can most definitely build, unless each one of those lots, unless they've
Sorry,
been,
I can show
unless
you.
they've been set out and you've actually measured and you can't meet setbacks.
Here's the map.
Mhm.
The blue, this green area here
Mhm.
is the 250 feet. I mean, this is your map. I'm sorry, I
Mhm.
got it off your webpage. Our understanding is that when you put this blue.
No, 250 feet does not mean you can't build there.
No. What does the blue stripe mean? Oh, what it says is, when I read it, it says that that's at a 20% slope and that's constricted. That's called resource. It's a resource protection area. So I can't build in a resource protection area. I just can't build there. So when I hook these up with other properties, you're absolutely right,
For
but they
two
would
or
be,
more contiguous acres.
well, that's what I have, unfortunately,
Mhm.
or fortunately, as the case may be. So I guess the major reason we're here is because I feel like this, and it's fair, I get it, from the Maine Shoreline Act is doing a good thing, but we personally can't benefit from these properties the way they're supposed to be benefited.
So can I ask a
Sure.
counter question? And this
Yeah.
is a little out of the norm, but if you can't build them, why would you want to keep them an independent record that's taxed at?
I don't mind doing it. I wanted to come here and have you say that if we put them all together, you'll reassess us at some reasonable price. Personally, I feel like going through the process of doing that is paperwork, because at the end of the day, what we're gonna design some lots, when I pass away and my whatever, decide to do whatever they do with the property, they're gonna have to start over anyway. So I don't see a great benefit in going back to in making it a single property, but if you all think that you would bring the assessment down $1.4 million, I would probably do that. But
Could I speak,
sorry.
Sorry, Ron, I
Tyler?
didn't- yeah.
And I'm sorry. First of all, we can't give tax advice. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure that the assessments for residents are fair, that they are consistent across neighborhoods and types of property. I would, however, say that I think you could explore what your options would be if you combined some or all of these properties. You could, for instance, combine it, and if you're not planning to develop it, put it into a different category of land use, into open space. I doubt that there's any agriculture going on there, but there are lower tax rates that can be entered into. And in the future, if the company wanted to divide the property, you would just have to meet the subdivision requirements in the planning ordinances. It wouldn't necessarily be a question of redividing into 9 different lots. As to the question of whether it is possible to build something on some of these lots of record, I really can't answer that. But I am going to assume that the tax assessor is considering that in each of these separate properties, and as well as the comparables that Tyler has been looking at. And even though it it seems that if you combined everything, it might be assessed at less. We can't look at it that way unless it's legally that way. We're not allowed to do that. So right now it's 9 separate lots and we have to look at them separately. That's just what I wanted to say before we got too far down the road.
I guess I would like to, so I haven't had a chance to look at the comparables that Tyler's listed here. But I just want to be sure that the comparables are in this district of home sites that are in the 20% restricted, in the 20% slope of the restricted area. Because I think comparables that are on where one could build anywhere within the within that zone is quite different as a comparable than the comparable that we would like to look for.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with that. I don't know if that's something that either. I mean, that'd be something the planning board would look at, or something, you know, and those. Are fairly general. I realize, I know it's steep and I know this because I'm quite familiar with the area there and there. I know we've built stuff in places that were a heck of a lot worse than that. So I'm not saying that.
Different. I think it's different now. That's where we woke up sort of when we saw the
Right.
Shoreline Act. Before, for sure, we thought we could build there. I mean, it's steep, but we thought we could build there. Under the Shoreline Act, it doesn't matter what we think. It's that they're telling us that if we're going to be compliant with the Shoreline Act, we can't build there.
So is that a question we should ask? Ben Tuen, our assessor? I don't know, I mean, is that?
That or I'd speak to Mike. I mean, I'd probably
Oh,
ask the
that's
code
true, too.
enforcement officer first and see
Okay,
what the slope.
What
Because
the
I understand
those are.
what Mr. Stevens is
Yes.
saying, but I'm not quite sure that
Right.
that's 100%. So,
cause I know there's a heck of a cliff there.
For sure.
But then there's also a lot of areas that aren't nearly as steep as a cliff that, like, once again, so I don't know, that would be more. Our codes guy could look at it. I mean, I think that would be just to
Yeah.
make sure we're looking at
No, I
it,
mean,
we're talking
all I
apples
can
and
say is,
apples.
I mean, this was,
Mhm.
to be honest, my son went to law school. And when he read the Shoreline Act, he pointed this out to me.
Wow.
I was certainly not aware of it, so.
Well,
And some of these things are-
there are a lot of things that are grandfathered with the shoreline zoning. And if there had been a dwelling already on any of these lots that you're talking about, you would definitely be able to replace it. Whether or not, I understand there isn't, whether or not you can put a new dwelling or a new structure is kind of, it's a very specific question beyond our capacity to judge, because we don't make those determinations ourselves. If you came to the planning board wanting to build on one of these properties, then all of these things would be invoked. So I think the suggestion is that someone consult with our code enforcement officer who deals with these questions all the time. Does that make sense?
Sorry,
So-
I just want to say, I mean, the Shoreline Act does say, it actually has a plan for when you have contiguous property
Mhm.
owned by the same group. And my interpretation, and maybe I'm not interpreting correctly, but our interpretation is that, yes, let's just take, I don't know if you can see it there, but say 6F. So 6F abuts property that's 006. And so we could carve out a 2-acre space, but it's true that the house would still have to be back behind the green line. It would have to be out of the shoreline, be 250 feet back from the shore, because that space, even when you abide by the Shoreline Act, you cannot build in this 20% zone when you have access to space behind it, which is not at a 20% slope and or beyond 250 feet from the shore.
So
So,
and I see Aria has her hands up.
sorry.
So, these are all obviously important points. And I'm considering, though I will defer to my colleagues, John and Ron, when I'm considering moving to defer action on this until there's a consultation with Mike Field, our CEO. I don't know how that is paid for. Obviously, that would be a town cost, but so that's one consideration for us. But I just throw that out there as a possibility for discussion amongst the select board at this point with Tyler.
I would want him to look at, it. I mean, it, just so we are on the same page and we're on the same, because some of these things are just cookie cutter and they don't take individual, individual sites into, into the picture. It's all just, that's generally that way, or that's generally that way. So you could have differences, not, once again, I realize that, there could be differences in those lots, and that's something that if Mike was able to, that way we know we aren't, we're just a little bit more clear on what we're looking at.
And I would add that Mr. Van Tynen, in part of this, there are lots in town, to pull from memory, I can't right now, where things are factored significantly less, more than 20%, because of a lack of buildability. And so I really do think if that's the contention, that we do want to bring in potentially the code enforcement officer to look at it. But I trust the assessor's work on the fair and value assessment there, based on comparison in the neighborhood.
Well, that's where I hope that I would have the opportunity to see what the comparables are, because we can look and see whether they are in the restricted regions or not. Should be pretty straightforward.
And there's always the chance that this office and you disagree on
Yeah.
what fair comparisons are,
Yeah,
but that is available on the website, and I can make that packet available
Yeah.
as well.
that'd be great.
I would say that if the board is going the route of tabling this for review from Mike, if Mike were to say, hey, that part of that motion should include to send it on to Bill if there's a lack of buildability, because that would rapidly be beyond our pay grade and we would need to bring in the assessor. Though I do think there's more to the story here than
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
get to tonight.
And I
That's-
actually don't know, how much does the code officer charge? I mean, what kind of a cost?
He's a-
That's not relevant right now.
Yeah. So that's my motion.
Before you.
Right.
Yeah, that's my motion, is to defer action on this.
And
I
to
move-
request an assessment by the code enforcement officer. And
And
if
if
he
necessary.
recommends it, refer back to
Bill
Van
Van Tynen.
Tynen for review.
So that's
I
my
was-
motion, Tyler. I move to defer action on this until it's reviewed first by the CEO, Mike Field, and if necessary, under his discretion and in consultation with you and anybody, else related to this matter on the board, that it needs a review by Bill Van Tynen, our assessor, that those both occur before this abatement request comes back before the board. That's my motion.
I'll second that, but I hope it gets shorter.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we can wordsmith it.
And
I just
and
wanted
would-
to be very clear what the steps are.
Yes, and I've got that down, and thankfully we've got the recording as well to review for the minutes. I will say that in the event that Mike determines this does need to go to Bill for further analysis, it is not likely that that'll be prior to our next meeting. Bill is recovering from an illness, and we have several lots that he will be coming down to. So we will be in touch on next times. I just want to make that clear to everyone that, yeah, so.
Are we talking about one specific lot that could be used as an example, as opposed to 5 or 6 lots? Because unless Mike says it needs to go to Van Tynen, I don't see spending the time on all the different pieces of property that are out there. Am I off base there?
If I may, you're absolutely right. I mean, we think that 6D, 6F, and 6G are the ones that we're concerned about.
You wrote that down.
I got that.
Yeah, okay.
It's in the picture, it's kind of in the picture, and in the top right of that, it points out that those are assessed at about 3 times the other properties,
Mhm.
the other lots.
Based on that analysis.
And, yeah,
All right, with that, everybody in favor and, tabling or deferring or whatever?
All right, we have 3-0. We've got direction and I'll be in touch with Mike and we'll go from there. And we'll keep you apprised of next steps. Thank you.
thank you very much.
And so the next item on the agenda is an abatement request from Darcy Reynolds Emerson, a personal representative of the estate of Eugene Reynolds on lot 3R, lot 36. And there's a requested reduction to fully abate the building, which is currently assessed at $110,800. In summary, Darcy Reynolds is the personal representative of the estate of Eugene Reynolds and is requesting this abatement on behalf of the estate. Miss Emerson contends that this parcel's building should be fully abated, and she makes this request on several factors: that the house has not been lived in or maintained for over 2 decades. The building was moved to the present site over a century ago, placed on a root cellar that is partially collapsed, and there's no foundation under the L. And in talking with Miss Emerson, who did not necessarily want to attend tonight because she felt that I talked her through what my recommendation would be, and effectively, she wanted me to reiterate, however, that the basement is currently flooded up over what the old boiler would have been. It's not a basement, it's a swimming pool. All the sills in the building have rotted, as have sections of the floor. It's unsafe for folks to go inside, and 2 of the dormers have completely detached from the roof, allowing for weather and animals inside. I could break down stuff a little bit more, but my recommendation is that I've compared this property to a handful of like properties. However, I do not feel that comparisons in this instance will affect my recommendation that this abatement request should be forwarded on to the assessing agent for further review. And this case is very similar to a previous abatement that was done on the Houghton Warren family property on Robin Hood Road, where a beautiful old home had gone a similar path as this one, and to date, that building has a $0 valuation. And so that is likely where Bill will be taking this, but he's the professional that needs to make that call. And so I recommend abatement request number 16 be sent on to Bill Van Tynen.
I'm happy to
that we-
move. I'll second.
Okay, I move that we send this request on to Bill Van Tynen for his review and consideration.
Second.
All in, all in favor?
And I'm seeing 3-0. Thank you very much. And in your packets, there was a slew of correspondence. We received the town report letter from Congresswoman Shelley Pingree. Over the last several years, we've received various town report letters, but now that the town report committee is in action, I wanted to make sure it was right front and center. The state of Maine also sent out a notice regarding rulemaking regarding the sanitary control of mollusk and shellfish. The town of Georgetown, it's now dated, but the recreation committee had put out a notice on yoga. The Richards Library had sent along a thank you letter for their donation that we sent along in the last budget. I'm going to add in Sharon to this agenda. And the Maine Municipal Association sent along their legislative bulletin. And John is actually going to get me the copy. I gave John the original of the Central Maine Power letter to town clerks before I had photocopied it. But effectively, this letter was just spelling out the good practices of why it's important, and they're glad they trim trees and so on. So it was a very perfunctory letter, but it's not in your packet. My apologies. In my defense, John has it. And how was that bus, John? No one laughed at that joke. I thought it was funny. And lastly, we received a funding request letter from the Patent Free Library, and I included their budget. We did have a receipt for pumping for the Comiskey's, and we also had a notice that the First Beach Trust is up for their main waste discharge license for renewal. And I would jump now into committee updates.
Right, in my planning board meeting, is that last night?
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay, yeah. Yeah, last night, whatever, last week. They found or realized in looking at some stuff that they had, also forgotten to put $500 for a new subdivision, fees in the fee schedule when we did that last year. So at some point, we're gonna have to do a, public hearing so we can get that upgraded. And then
Would would it be appropriate to jump in on that, John? If the board's comfortable, I could slate that public hearing for our next meeting on March 11th. That way
Let's
we
do
could
it.
just,
Let's get it done.
perfect.
Perfect.
Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, that's awesome. That's good. Do we need a motion or are we just good?
I think that
We're good.
we're
Thank
good.
you, Director.
Okay. And then, just this afternoon, I met with the Trafton Oliver, or with at the
About the
historical-
cemetery.
about the cemetery. And there's still, other than knowing that it's there and knowing that we need to take care of it, there's just still a lot more questions as to what, they still don't know exactly how big it is. Just because the stones have been moved around so much. The edge that was caving in or falling over, originally it sounded to me like it had been on the edge of the shore, but it's not. It's where they had been a gravel pit. So that's actually grown back up. It's got vegetation on it, so it's not like it's gonna erode away anymore. But they're looking into getting some ground penetrating radar, which is just like a little lawnmower type thing, and going over it and trying to figure out the extent of the cemetery, possibly how many actual burial sites there are in it. And at this point, we've got no idea of what costs would be. They're just trying to figure that out right now. And there will be more to come once some of that stuff's been figured out. And obviously, a lot of that's gonna wait until after the snow is gone. So we've got at least a little while to wait on that. So that's all I have.
Thank you, John.
The Conservation Commission has a notice out for a Zoom informational meeting on March 6th about opportunities to volunteer as a science investigator. They have several programs that they would need some volunteer workers for. Some of these tasks are appropriate for the right age young person, and some of them are more suited to adults, but they're all fun and interesting. And information is available on their, I guess their website, but it's a message went out today to the Jim Peavy list, and I hopefully Allison can grab that link in her bridge notes. The Solid Waste Committee had a great extra meeting with the town attorney. It was very helpful in focusing their attention on possible amendments to the solid waste ordinance. And that will be moving forward slowly. Also, Allison shared a report this afternoon about some illegal dumping at the transfer station. Apparently, 2 individuals who have been caught on camera a number of times deposited an item into the bulky container that we cannot accept, and we'll have to dig it out and take it, dispose of it otherwise, which will cost the town money. And in that context, I mean, these individuals have started wearing hats and masks, hence they know that they are not authorized to do what they're doing. And I just would like to point out that government is like a contract, which is a contract with each other in town, that we will all abide by the rules of the town, and that we will try to spread taxation fairly across the population. And this is a breaking of that covenant. There's a lot of breaking of covenants going on right now, and it's anti-capitalist. That's my bottom line. So I'm not sure what can be done about this, but I think it's very unfortunate, and I hope that if anyone happens to know who these people are, that they will report them so that we can appropriately fine them for what is going to cost the town money. That's it. That's it for me for reports.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Aria?
Yes, the Board of Appeals met last night and elected its new chair. which is Rufus Brown. And they got some good work done on the budget. I would say that they are done with their budget. And Judy Taylor from the FAC, who's online now, was a big help to them. And so we're wrapping that up, and it's a smooth meeting. Tomorrow night at 5 o'clock, the school committee meets on a hybrid fashion. On Thursday, the harbor committee will be meeting at 5:30, also hybrid. And on the rec committee side of things, please remember that you still have until March 27 to submit your Citizen of the Year nominations, honoring somebody or an entity. We've had over the last 5 years a couple of different combinations of recipients, but in any event, people or a person who has stepped up in 2025 and shown some real volunteer and community service to our town. And that's it for my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Aria. And with that, if there are no questions for Aria or any of the other reports, I will quickly jump into my town administrator update. I want to let folks know that tomorrow, the replacement of our entryway doors will be starting, and this is mostly funded by ARPA. There was a little bit coming out of accrued funds. This project will conclude by the end of the day Thursday. In terms of traffic, I've spoken with the school ahead of time, and we will post which door to use to access the town office. When they are working on the door next to the parking lot, folks will have to enter from the school side and vice versa. But we didn't want to post that today because I don't know which door they're starting with. In terms of keys, the outside doors will have 2 each that are new. And I've arranged for the harbor committee to utilize one of those keys Thursday evening so we can keep the building secure. But next week, Brunswick Lock and Key will be coming in, a date to be determined, to make everything uniform again so committee chairs can get into their meetings, and so the code enforcement officer can get to his desk because his key has suddenly stopped working anyway. So this was fortuitous. I also wanted to note that we are continuing to monitor current events and their potential impacts on the town of Georgetown. And I just want to note that the town warrant typically has a warrant article. Last year it was warrant article 15 that allowed for unintended expenses and an emergency use of the undesignated fund balance without the need of calling a special town meeting. Internally at the office, we've begun talking about what this article should look like next year, given some of the things that remain in flux. Last year, that Article 15 had a limit of $10,000, and I just asked the select board to begin thinking about whether or not this may be the avenue that we potentially increase that limit, because the undesignated fund balance is the money that rolls over at the end of the year and can be used to offset taxes, but it wouldn't be necessarily creating a reserve fund to dip into that you would have to raise and appropriate from taxpayers. So just be thinking about that in the coming weeks as we move towards town meeting. And that might not be the solution, but I do think it's one that can leave this select board very nimble on its feet should something funding wise change. And
Tyler,
yes,
Tyler,
yes.
thank you for looking ahead. Keep your eyes on the High Line like that.
Thank you very much.
On that note, of course, I appreciate it.
All right. Did you have, and on that note, was there more? Okay. And I wanted to let folks know that I will be having a virtual class tomorrow regarding town meetings that's hosted by MMA. I'm going to leave the town office tomorrow during lunch, just so you know. I'll be available by phone, but it's a several hour Zoom anyway. So I figure that if we're paying the money to have me educated, I should get through it the best I can without distraction. And so that's work. I would also note that the town report committee is holding its first meeting on Monday, and all 5 of our members are excited to attend. And on next week, I'm hoping I'm able to join our emergency management director on Tuesday for a FEMA related call, and we'll report back on that. And Alex had sent along a memo about the offices that are up for election this year. And I just want to note that there is one select board position open for 3 years, ending in 2028. That is John Collins. The town clerk and tax collector are both up for office this year, held by Alex Kelly. The school committee seat for a 3-year term ending in 2028, currently held by Jen Dobransky, is up. Stephen Mace's current seat on the TOP&B is up for a 3-year term. The cemetery trustees, Carol Start is up for election for a 3-year term, and the road commissioner is up for a 3-year term as well. So I just wanted to let folks know, papers will be available next Monday, March 3rd. Residents are asked if they want to put their name on the ballot to get a minimum of 25 and no more than 100 signatures. And Alex had just asked that we reiterate that tonight. And 2 more quick things. I wanted to note that on Monday, March 10th, I'll be taking probably a half day because that is my birthday, and I just wanted to let you guys know ahead of time. And lastly, a very big thank you to Representative Allison Hepler. The Campbell Square Cemetery needed a new flag, and Representative Hepler managed to get us one that flew over the State House, and it was very kind of her to get that for us. So, and I saw that celebration, Aria. That was awesome. But with that concludes my report, unless there are any questions. Seeing none, I will gladly pass this quickly to Mary.
Okay, as Tyler just mentioned, we are aware of all the new federal challenges that are going out there. We're monitoring them for budget purposes. At this point, I don't think we need to change anything in the current budget. We're also watching the state, and potentially, there's a bunch of stuff in the hopper that may or may not affect us as far as services that we are required to provide. The general assistance budget, after we expanded it with our special town meeting, has gone mostly unused. I expect that we'll be pulling back in about $10,000 from that fund that will not be utilized. January financials were distributed earlier this month. They're in line of where I would expect them to be at this time of year. Roughly 60% on some, little under that in others. As noted at the last finance director update, we had the 7 notices of foreclosure going out to 7 property owners for 9 accounts for 2022 property taxes that remain unpaid. Those notices of foreclosure have gone out. 1 taxpayer has already been in and paid, and those will automatically foreclose at the end of March. The auditors are currently trying to wrap up fiscal year 23-24, which ended June 30 of 2024. And at this point, we are awaiting the school audit. I have reached out to the finance director down there, but she doesn't really have a firm date yet on that. The FAC is now meeting. The budget is underway. Budgets are due in from the committees by March 18. As part of what I normally do every year anyway, I'm looking at reserve funds. I'm looking at revenues, anything that we can bump up, anything that we can get that we hadn't, been accounting for previously that we could be using. And also really taking a good look at the reserve funds and whether or not any of those can be utilized for possibly other purposes, which obviously requires town meeting approval. The school committee, as I think Aria just mentioned, will be holding they have a meeting next week. No, they have a meeting tomorrow, and then they have a budget meeting on March 5th at 5 o'clock. And we just got today the copy of the budget, that they're working from. And then the fire department had their informational meeting down at the community center a couple weeks ago. Well attended, good input, I think, and good conversation. So we'll just keep that going. So I think that was about it for me.
Thank you, Mary. Brahma?
Did you want to make a recommendation about COLA at this point in time? Mary and I had discussed the current, the Financial Advisory Committee is looking to the Select Board to make recommendations about salaries and personnel. And one of the first issues that affects all the committees is whether we're going to make a COLA adjustment this year. The Social Security COLA will be 2.5%.
Correct, 2.5%, yes.
And Mary's recommendation was that we go with 2%, which if you want to tackle that at this meeting, I'd be happy to move that we, at least as a placekeeper in the budget negotiations or the budget deliberations, that we endorse that. If you'd
No, that'd be a
rather
great
not
idea,
talk about it
actually.
tonight, that's fine, but
Yep. Yes, and I had mentioned that at the last meeting that we would need, the FAC will need direction from the board on that. So if you're willing and ready to do that right now, that would be a great idea.
I'd like to move that we go with 2% with the understanding that it can be revisited once the larger picture about the budget is more clear,
Yep.
going forward.
Yeah, that at least it allows us to tie in other things like the, paid family medical leave and the insurance, all that other stuff that goes along with it. So, yes. And the other
Well-
part of that was, I'm sorry, Bronwyn, let
Well,
you go ahead
we
and finish.
we need to, I mean, I haven't heard back from the other guys, and we need to
Right.
either vote that or table that thought, but which, how do you see it?
I'll second it.
Okay, no. All in favor? I'm all for it.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, and the other piece of that, Brahman, that you and I have discussed is that the federal, currently we're paying 67 cents per mile at a mileage rate. And that they were going up to 0.70. I don't feel as the person that runs those numbers that we necessarily need to go with that. So my recommendation at that point is to leave it at 67.
Mileage reimbursement is given to whom? Who?
Mileage reimbursement is given when we head up to MMA for a class, when we have to travel somewhere for training of any type, things like that.
So it's basically you and Tyler that receive that, unless there's, well, I guess other volunteers.
Shellfish warden, I imagine the shellfish warden,
Yeah.
does he
Yeah,
submit?
Shellfish
The
warden
fire,
does it, the
fire
harbor
chief,
master. Mhm.
harbor master,
Yeah, the
town
harbor,
clerk.
and the town clerk takes quite a bit of that in her banking. So, yeah. Yeah, but every budget, animal control, those, all small budgets have those.
So should we make a motion on that too?
I think you should, if you don't mind, yes. I'd like to request that you leave it at 67 cents.
I will move that.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Bronwyn,
And-
for reminding
I
me. I
think-
appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think it's my recollection that it went up to 67 last year. So
It did.
it consistently, 67 to 70 isn't that big of a jump year over year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, good, thank you.
Any other questions for Mary? If not, we will move into our item of old business, which is the designation of the 2024 Georgetown Spirit of America Award. Bronwyn.
I would like to move that we nominate Sharon and Bob Trebona to receive the Spirit of America Award, and that we authorize Tyler to create a proclamation to be read at the county committee celebration of town recipients in April.
And I enthusiastically second that motion.
All in favor?
All right. And that is an enthusiastic recording of 3-0. Thank you very much.
With
And
lots
I
of
would
smiles, yes.
And I would just note for all the folks in attendance, for members of the board, the Spirit of America Award ceremony is going to take place on April 17th this year. John, as chair of the select board, if he's available that day, will be taking part in helping present said award. And members of the public and members of the board are encouraged to attend if they're able to. And I don't have the time yet, but I know that will be coming soon. So keep the 17th of April open if you can. And the next item of business under new business is putting the snowplow contracts out to bid. And so it is that time of year, the 2-year extension on the 3-year contracts expires, and we need to get some numbers in for budget. So what I would ask is that we get a motion from the board to put the 2 contracts, the municipal contract and the road contract for snow plowing out to bid. And then after that, I have a couple of questions I want to ask about timeline, just so we're all on the same page. But if folks are comfortable with that, it's time.
How can we avoid it?
Exactly.
with snow all over the slowly
sure.
melting and icing up again overnight. Yes.
So could we get a motion? to
I'd move that we put out to bid both contracts.
All right.
Second.
All right, and before we vote on that, I want to clarify what that means. So for both contracts, I would like them to mirror, so I'm going to be asking the date we put them out, the date returned, when we're opening them, by who, and ideally, my recommendation would be to have the select board make a decision on the April 8th meeting, which is the first meeting of April. And so for the municipal contract, I would recommend that we put that out to bid, have an ad in the paper for March 3rd. Do folks object to us putting it out next Monday?
Well, no, wait a
Any-
minute. That bids are due March 3rd. Is that what you're
No,
saying?
we would be putting out a notice in the Times Record and getting publicity out there that we're putting these out to bid
On the 3rd.
on the 3rd. So we would
And
finish
bids
draft,
would, okay, then bids would be due back.
I would say, on the 31st, which is a Monday as well. So we give folks a full month to get bids in. If the board was amenable, I would say that they should be opened on April 1st. That way we can get the bids all in order for the board to make a decision. And not to selfishly recommend myself, but I think I should open those bids at, say, 11 a.m. on the 1st. So
Are there any other venues we should consider putting the ad or the notice to bid or whatever out on?
And should we
I'm-
send it,
it-
should we
yeah.
send it directly to some of the contractors that might be interested or that do snow plowing? Right? I mean, we often,
yeah,
with the TOPMB, would send the solicitation of bids to people who had bid in the past or people that we thought might be interested in the project. And it seems like that is the most direct way because there are a limited number of firms that are going to be interested at all.
absolutely. I
Okay.
think that makes sense. And so in the town contract, I wanted to clarify as well if there was anything that we should be adding in for the municipal areas. I know there'd been a TOPMB request about the ramp, but I wanted to,
I don't think that's gonna be, they're
they're all set now?
doing it, but I don't know if that's plowing the ramp, at least. For the amount that it gets used, usually it's if somebody running late, like somebody I see plowed it out, it was not us. Somebody had it plowed because they're pulling the boat out,
Right.
and I don't know, I really don't know if that's something we wanna be responsible for.
You wanna be plowing.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
For the amount of times it gets used.
Mhm.
and
We
it's
talking, what
probably-
are we talking about? Todd's Landing,
Yeah, Todd's Landing.
the boat ramp?
For the
Is
boat
it
ramp.
even feasible to plow? Are they
it's-
talking the parking lot or the ramp
I
itself?
think it's the whole thing. You know, that would be the whole thing, but it's, if it's snowy, it's probably frozen, and the amount of people that would use it is just, I mean, you'll get the wormers down there, but the wormers are walking down other places anyway. I don't know if that's an extra added cost we really wanna be covering.
Okay,
I mean, that's just my,
Yeah,
I mean, you're looking at. Well, I'm just saying from our point of view, you're probably looking at least $100 a time. Just to plow it, and probably another 50 or so to sand it. If not, I mean,
seems-
so it's, you know,
it seems like
it's a,
it seems
it's
like
an added
plowing the
cost.
actual ramp might be counterproductive. That, plowing the ramp might tear it up more than make it usable.
I mean, one would hope it's frozen in the winter time,
Uh-huh.
but I mean,
It's-
once again, it's just, I just don't know if it's if it's something we really wanna to mess with. I mean, do we want cars going down there and possibly get stuck and, who's gonna roll down into the ice and,
makes sense to me. I just figured it had been raised, so now would be the
Now's the
time to
time to
see if
talk
we were
about it.
including
but
it.
I'm not the only one considering it, so.
But, and I see Aria has
You
her
are
hand
the
up.
expert.
Just a question, and John, you may know the answer to this. Is the Schoner parking lot a town? Is that something y'all plow or somebody plows?
Nope.
Sometimes it's plowed and sometimes it's not. Currently, it's plowed, but it hasn't
There are
been plowed before. So that's just somebody out of the goodness of their heart doing it.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure, so thank you for clarifying that.
And by parking lot, you mean the entry to the
There
dirt road.
to the dirt road and the Storybook Trail and the Sleddon Hill and all that.
Mm.
Which just for the record is not town property and therefore we would not plow that.
Right, that's what I assumed, but I
Yeah.
just wasn't sure
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
just wasn't.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of that, Ari, actually, good Samaritans that, you know, they see it needs it because, you know, a bunch of people are gonna get together and go sliding or whatever, and they, you know, do it themselves, so we're very blessed that way.
We sure
And I-
are. Thank you.
And I would just note that on the roads contract, that there are approximately 33 miles of road to be plowed. And so,
And we haven't added anything to that contract, I don't believe, since. Right?
No,
No,
I think
nothing new.
the last thing that was added would have been the dry hydrant down there at Charles
At Charles
Pond. I think,
Pond, right.
and that's, in my recollection, that would be the only thing we've added,
Yep,
recently.
no extension on
No,
North End or nothing.
no, all
Okay.
of that's been the same.
and so I know Aria has a motion that Bronwyn seconded, and I just want to clarify, does that motion include putting this out to bid starting on the 3rd of March, ending on the 31st of March, to be opened on April 1st at 11 a.m. by the town administrator and the select board decide the snowplow contract, choose to award it rather for both municipal and roads on April 8th, 2025.
That was my motion. Exactly.
Perfect.
And I happily seconded that with all the dates. And I think that, and as far as, we don't need an amendment about about Todd's Landing because we're not inclined to add it to so the bid will be for the existing, contract, existing roads and parking lots as previously, stipulated.
Yes.
Correct.
And we will work to get those updated. They'll also be on the town website for review for folks to be able to see what they're bidding on. But I do think, Bronwyn, you are correct. It makes sense to reach out to the folks that would be bidding anyway and make sure they have a copy of it. So, yeah,
Yep. All in favor? I can bid on it since I'm not.
exactly.
You can
Before.
vote, you can vote to put it out to bid.
I can
You can't
for it,
vote on
I'll
who
bid
gets
exactly.
it.
That's right.
Well,
And
unless
that-
you guys don't bid, that would be a disaster.
And that was 3-0. I'd note that for items for signature, that there is a resolution that will eventually be signed by members of the board to be presented in April. And that the 2 abatement applications, one has been sent to Bill Van Tynen and the other we're awaiting code enforcement officer feedback to determine if we go to Bill Van Tynen. So with that, John, we're done with the agenda and I turn this over to you for public comment.
Is there any public comment? Do not see any.
All right.
Oh, good, then I will entertain a motion
To adjourn. I move to adjourn.
I'll second that one too.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Night, everybody.
Night, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.